Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure to be here.
So today we're diving into some pretty profound material.
Sounds intriguing. What do we got?
We're looking at a lecture by Neville Goddard called Experience the Mystery of Christ. You guys sent this in, and well, it's packed with some pretty thought-provoking ideas, particularly about who we are, the nature of truth, and the essence of God.
Neville Goddard, always a fascinating exploration of consciousness.
Right. His perspective is so unique, so let's just get right into it, shall we? Goddard starts off by suggesting that the world's kind of, hostile reaction to Jesus Christ. It stems from a basic misunderstanding of who the Father really is. What do you make of that connection?
Well, the fascinating thing here is how Goddard ties the understanding of the mystery of Jesus Christ directly to knowing your true self, your divine self.
Okay.
They're like two sides of the same coin for him. The deeper you understand one, the more you realize the other.
Yeah, and he really takes it a step further, right? It culminates in this realization that you are Jesus Christ.
And there never was or will be another. Well, that's a pretty huge statement.
Oh, absolutely. And when you consider Goddard's teachings as a whole, it aligns perfectly with his emphasis on the power of individual consciousness and the fundamental unity of everything in the divine. The key takeaway is that divinity isn't somewhere out there. It's your very essence, waiting to be recognized.
It's not external.
Exactly. A radical departure from traditional beliefs.
Yeah, big time. So then he takes us to the Gospel of John, specifically to the interaction between Pilate and Jesus.
Right.
But he doesn't approach it as just a historical event.
Yeah.
He's looking for a deeper internal meaning.
He does. Goddard views Pilate not so much as a historical figure, but as a representation of a contracted state within each of us. Think of it like, when you're overwhelmed by a problem and your perspective narrows, that feeling of limitation separation. For Goddard, all those scriptural figures represent eternal states of consciousness, not just people who lived.
Oh, I see.
This whole drama, it unfolds within you. Okay, so when Pilate asks, "Are you the king of the Jews?"
Yeah.
What's Goddard's take on that internally?
He sees it as that limited aspect of yourself, wondering if it's about to break free from those constraints, from those feelings of separation. And Jesus' response, asking Pilate whether his understanding comes from experience or hearsay, well, it just highlights that vital difference between knowing something firsthand and being told about it.
It's like that aha moment.
Exactly, that moment when your understanding shifts and that limited part of you starts questioning what's happening.
Yeah. It's about direct personal knowing as opposed to just secondhand information.
Right.
And Goddard also makes a clear distinction between worldly knowledge, like, scientific discoveries, speech travel, and the truth that Jesus spoke of, which he equates with the true knowledge of God.
Absolutely. This true knowledge, for Goddard, leads to the realization that the power that created and sustains the universe, well, that's who you are at your core. We've just forgotten it, he says, due to that limit of contraction, that Pilate state. Again, it's about experiencing this truth, not just accepting it as an idea.
It's about knowing, not just believing.
Yes.
And this reminds me of something the poet Robert Browning wrote about truth residing within and knowledge being the way for that imprisoned splendor to escape.
Oh, it's beautiful.
How does Goddard connect that poetic image to his interpretation?
It's a perfect reflection of how he understands those I am statements in John's Gospel. I am the truth. I am the way. I am the light of the world. He doesn't see those as referring to someone external.
Right.
They're about truths to be discovered and lived within each individual. That imprisoned splendor is our own inherent divine potential, and the way is through an inner awakening, not by seeking something outside of ourselves.
So the idea of Christ coming from without is essentially a misunderstanding.
Exactly. It's about the inner stirring, the divine essence within.
Right, that inner awakening and that feeling we sometimes get, of being small and insignificant in this vast universe. That's that Pilate, that contracted state, questioning this emerging inner light, right?
Precisely. That feeling of smallness is part of that limited perspective.
Okay. Now, Goddard then makes a pretty striking statement. The self you're seeking for is your Father, who is yourself. He also introduces this kind of paradoxical idea of being both the root and the offspring of David. How do we make sense of that?
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. For Goddard, David symbolizes humanity as a whole, reduced to a single being. He interprets the scripture to mean, and I'm paraphrasing here, I am the root and the offspring of David. I am the father of David. I
Wow.
am the offspring of David.
Wow.
It's like a playwright who creates characters, the offspring, but is also the source and originator, the root and father of the entire play. He connects this to the idea that you, as the divine being, have immersed yourself in the human experience, played every conceivable role.
So we've lived all the lives, experienced all the perspectives.
Right, and ultimately we awaken from this grand play.
We extricate ourselves from our own creation.
Exactly.
And David, this representation of humanity is like the son who brought forth you, the Father, the Creator. So the originator of the universe and humanity, they're one and the same. It's pretty mind-bending when you think about it.
It really is. And it beautifully encapsulates Goddard's teaching of the ultimate unity of all being, with your individual self at the center of that divinity.
It all comes back to the self.
It does.
He also delves into the phrases, I am from above, you are from below, interpreting above as within and below as without.
Okay.
And he suggests that the most significant revelation that was rejected was the fatherhood of God, that we are the Father. What's his basis for this interpretation?
Goddard contends that the most profound revelation, the one that was resisted, was the realization that you are the Father, regardless of your current circumstances, your earthly situation. He ties this back to the Shema in Deuteronomy. The Lord our God, the Lord is one.
One.
Emphasizing the singular nature of God, leaving no room for a separate external deity.
It's all one.
Yes.
And this understanding then informs his take on the second commandment, love thy neighbor as thyself. Because for him, the world is essentially our own consciousness projected outward.
That's right.
So changing our inner state, our attitude towards that projection, that's how we change our external reality.
Precisely. It all stems from that fundamental oneness. If everything you experience is a manifestation of your own consciousness, then how you treat others is ultimately how you're treating yourself.
Right. Everything is interconnected. So then he comes back to I am the truth and the idea that Jesus Christ, the sole power of resurrection, resides within each of us. He describes resurrection as this breaking of the shell, leading to liberation and the gradual realization of our identity as the creator. Even death, in his view, is just a return to that inner center.
Yes, death isn't an ending for Goddard, but a return to the source. That central point of consciousness exists within everyone because ultimately there's only one.
Only one, okay.
And he shares that story about his friend Al, who had passed away but hadn't changed his beliefs when Goddard encountered him in an inner experience. It illustrates that this awakening is deeply personal. It's not something that automatically happens just because of physical death.
It's an inner transformation.
Exactly.
And he argues that the rejection of Jesus Christ wasn't about rejecting an individual, but about rejecting his revelation of the fatherhood of God. The inability to accept that I and my Father are one, and therefore I and your Father are one, and ultimately you and I are one.
Powerful stuff.
He's critical of our tendency to worship external idols while overlooking the divine spark within ourselves.
Right. For Goddard, clinging to externalized concepts of God actually gets in the way of realizing our own divine nature.
It blocks us.
Yes. He emphasizes that you are God, and you are God the Father of humanity. And he sees life as this grand theatrical play, orchestrated by God, who plays all the parts, ultimately leading us to self-discovery, a return to our true identity.
Just back to the source.
Back to the source.
He also touches on the interpretation of the Old Testament. He points out that it was the only scripture available at the time of these revelations and that the New Testament passages are interpretations of it.
Okay.
He discusses John 1:18 and its variations regarding the only begotten to illustrate the concept of God begetting himself and humanity as the Son. For Goddard, based on his personal experience, David represents this only begotten Son. This differs quite significantly from traditional theological interpretations, wouldn't you say?
It certainly highlights how much Goddard prioritizes direct personal experience in understanding spiritual truths, even if it means reinterpreting existing doctrines.
Experience over dogma.
Yes.
Then he shares this very vivid, symbolic vision of a bleeding French loaf in a casino.
Oh, wow.
What's the significance of that imagery?
That vision serves as a potent metaphor for embracing your own wonderful imagination as the body of God, the creative force that shapes your reality.
Okay.
The loaf being sliced and then transforming into blood symbolizes the full acceptance of this inner power. Reaching a point where you no longer blame anyone else for your experiences, that's what he means by having eaten the loaf of bread, really accepting responsibility for your creations.
Taking ownership.
Exactly.
He also mentions letters from listeners describing their personal visions, including one where I, the host, appear to die.
Oh, interesting.
He interprets this positively as a necessary spiritual transformation, a symbolic death preceding a new awakening. It echoes Blake's sentiment, "Unless I die, thou canst not live, but if I die, I shall arise again, and thou with me."
I like that.
He even shares his own experience of having awakened from the dream of life, being born from above, which he claims is unique to God.
These accounts really underscore Goddard's belief in the power of inner experiences and visions as direct paths to recognizing our divine nature.
Pathways to awakening.
Exactly.
He then talks about inheriting the kingdom as inheriting a perfect body formed from the very foundation of the world, and that wherever this awakened being is, that is heaven. Imperfection is instantly transmuted by this divine presence. He revisits the idea that while the world might not know the Father, a select few will eventually come to believe.
It paints a picture of complete transformation of perception of how you experience reality once this inner awakening occurs.
It changes everything.
It does. It's a shift where your very presence radiates that transformative power.
It's like an internal alchemy. And then he comes back to that core idea. There is no external God. The power that sustains and created the cosmos, well, it resides within you. He explains Elohim, a Hebrew term for God, which is often plural, as representing humanity collectively forming the one God. And he emphasizes that the focus should be on internal transformation, not on trying to change the external world. He even shares an experience of feeling like just a number in the external world, which contrasts sharply with our true identity as the creator.
It's a powerful contrast that emphasizes the primacy of inner awareness over external circumstances. That anecdote about his interaction with, what was it, health, education, and welfare, really highlights that feeling of insignificance we can have in the material world, while our true significance lies within.
And this leads to the practical application of Goddard's teachings, the power of imagination. He says, if you believe a desired state to be true and live as if it's already a fact, it will manifest because imagination is the creative force. He encourages us, the listeners, to put this into practice.
That's the heart of it, isn't it? By consciously directing your imagination, assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you're directly engaging with that creative power within.
It's about aligning your inner and outer worlds.
Yes.
Finally, he makes the point that the only way to find God is through experiencing the story of Jesus Christ within yourself. External pursuits, scientific discoveries, they won't lead you to the Father. He comes back to the concept of Jesus as both the root and the offspring of David, emphasizing their oneness, with David representing humanity. He ends by sharing his personal realization of being the father of David and finding confirmation in the Old Testament, underscoring the power of personal experience over any external validation.
He closes by bringing it all back home. The journey to knowing God is an inward one, a personal unfolding of the Christ story within your own consciousness.
So, if we were to distill this deep dive into Goddard's lecture down to its essence, his message is this: you are the divine being. You are the Father. And the key to realizing this isn't through some external search, but through experiencing the mystery of Christ within yourself.
And that seemingly external world with all its complexity, it's a projection of your inner self.
It all comes back to the self. It really is a fundamental shift in perspective, moving from an externalized deity to recognizing the divine potential that resides within each of us.
It's empowering, isn't it?
So here's a final thought for you to ponder. If the entirety of reality truly originates within your own consciousness, what unimaginable potential might be lying dormant within you? What becomes possible when you embrace that idea?
Something to contemplate.
It's something to explore long after this deep dive ends. Thanks for being with us, everyone.